If you find yourself in your head a lot, this video is for you. So many of us have found ourselves at one point or another looped in mental thoughts. And the challenge with being looped in mental thoughts is that it can generate a feeling of anxiety and a feeling of being stuck in our minds. See, the funny thing about our minds is that they can only really operate in the present moment. Even when you're thinking about something in the past or you're contemplating something in the future, it's all happening right now. The mind itself can only give you ideas and probabilities of what you can do if something happens in the future. And one of the ways we overclock our mind and our energy is by trying to think and think and think about what we might need to do in order to adjust our lives for something that might happen. In other words, when we are trying to think about how to handle the future with our minds, we are basically giving our minds a lot of homework to do all at once. We're saying, please account for all these probabilities. And the mind goes on it. And it thinks and it thinks and it thinks and it thinks and it thinks. And one of the reasons, though, that all that thinking never actually calms us down is because even though it's showing you that it can come up with solutions, right? It can come up with solutions or ideas for many different possibilities. The mind doesn't really have a way to future tell or to account for the future. Again, the mind can consider probabilities, but life happens regardless of the mind's plans. So when we feel really anxious, there is a certain level of over-reliance on the mind, and there's a certain level of forgetting or disconnection from the body. So in this video, a little bit further right here, I'm going to help guide us through some of the things that you can do to reconnect with your body a bit more. Because you see, trust happens first in the body. Our bodies are incredible tools. And to be clear, trust happens when our energetic selves, our emotional selves, our expanded selves are in harmonious resonance with our whole body. And this is why, in order for us to feel grounded, the body and all other levels of the self generally need to be on board with each other. And when we are assigning the mind responsibility for keeping us safe, and it can only do so much, it can only give us ideas or possibilities. What it really needs, what we really require in order to feel safe in our bodies is a few different things. One is a willingness for our energy, as much as our energy and focus as possible, to not only be present in the moment, meaning actually not in our minds, but feeling our energy in all the different systems of our body. And in order to feel that, sometimes that means certain levels. I'm gonna say this, then we're gonna put an asterisk next to this. Certain levels of what we might say emotional processing that's happened in the body, because a lot of us have some kind of energetic baggage stored in our body. The equivalent would be if your body is a garage and you open your garage and it's full of boxes that you haven't sorted through yet. Many of us have unsorted boxes in the garage of our body, so to speak. And the challenge comes when we have more boxes than we are able, when our garage, when our body, when our system is so full of boxes that we can't maneuver in it. it can be very common to have some boxes there, and we're certainly not suggesting that you have to aim for perfection with this. And when we have unaddressed emotional items in the body, sometimes we subconsciously block off areas of ourself so we don't access them, because it's almost like, okay, I don't want to look at that, I want to deal with that. And when we create those kinds of subconscious patterns in our body, then when we want to do something else that's helpful, like integrate and reconnect deeply with our body, then sometimes we're like, oh, in order to go there, I actually need to address this thing first. Now, I put an asterisk there because there's also this tendency, I think, that's sprung up recently of getting stuck in almost like a processing cycle, where it's like I'm feeling the feelings, I'm processing the feelings, I'm processing the feeling of the feelings. And it can also just feel like that's a different kind of loop, right? So we get out of our mind loop and now we're in like the body emotional processing loop. And I think it can also, that can be another hamster wheel we find ourselves on. I know that I did. I know there was a lot of time that first I spent mentally processing in my life, and then there was a lot of time I spent attempting to process through my body. And I remember one time, because I've gone to a lot of different mentors myself over the years. I remember one time a mentor said, well, you're processing in your body, but is that really what you want to be doing? Do you want to keep doing that? And I thought that was an interesting question at the time, because I was thinking to myself, well, what I gotta do. It's, what I need to do, right? And what I found was, at least in my own journey so far, is that sometimes we create certain habits, certain habit patterns for ourselves, consciously or unconsciously, about how much we need to mentally or physically or emotionally or anything else process. And part of the way of getting us back to the present moment is for us to start having more conversations with parts of ourselves that feel uncomfortable. Now, some people call this parts work. If you want to look this up, some people call this internal family systems. And the concept is that you have many different parts of yourself. Maybe you have younger parts of yourself, older parts, maybe you have angry parts, maybe you have like different perspectives inside of yourself that might actually be operating from a place of attempting to protect you or attempting to guard a certain amount of your energy. So for example, this is a good example. Maybe you have an internal part of yourself that starts to judge you very harshly if it thinks that you're procrastinating or being lazy. And it's like it shows up as like an inner critic or a mental voice that goes, oh, you're not doing this work, you should really be doing this work, you gotta do this, what's gonna happen if you don't do it, like you gotta figure this out for the future. And this internal part may be very intense or antagonistic with you at a certain point. But from another level, it's a part of yourself that was placed there in order to, it thinks it's helping you because it thinks it's helping you by making sure that you're not lazy or procrastinating, because it's trying to help you avoid the consequence of potentially being lazy or procrastinating. But it's going about it in a way that is not necessarily ideal. It's going about it in a way that might be draining your energy, that might be very painful for you. So it's like trying to punch yourself to keep yourself awake or something. Like that could theoretically work, but maybe there's also other methods to do that. Now, here's the thing with internal family systems and these kinds of approaches, maybe these parts of ourselves are so ingrained, or we have so much energetic momentum behind them, that it can actually feel like trying to push uphill to change it. And sometimes any attempt to try and force change, like if this conscious self is trying to be like, well, hey, stop being an inner critic at me, get on board, it's almost like trying to have an inner battle with yourself Just think about, if you have an argument with someone outside of you and like they're acting in a way that you think is like, well, you should act different. You're being rude. And they're like, well, you're being rude. And, you guys go at it. This is reflected in our inner state as well. So, something I'd say to you is if you're finding yourself having a lot of external battles, on some level, that may be pointing into the way that you're working with yourself internally. Now, the challenge is it's also not about necessarily, toppling over and just giving in to everything the internal self wants. It's which is also not very productive, and it's also not necessarily a productive way to approach external conflict. What we are navigating when we are finally ready to be the true masters of our inner selves is we are finally ready to stand for our values and who we are, and then when we come to conflict, to approach it in a way with curiosity where we are willing to take the steps that are resonant for all involved. And when we say that, all involved includes you as well. And sometimes when we approach that way and there is something that's not bending, it doesn't mean that we need to necessarily bend over for that part, but it does mean that we need to get more curious and more creative and more assertive in how we approach something. And this is a certain level of energetic mastery. And when it comes to, so coming back to this point, coming back to the mind, coming back to grounding in the body, coming back to being able to talk to inner parts of yourself, when we are attempting to shift our nature, when we are attempting to work with inner parts of ourselves in resistance, we don't approach them with fight. We approach them with curiosity, an open heart, and a deep sense of groundedness that all the parts of you are parts of you, and every part of you is wanted, even if it's in a certain state that doesn't seem ideal right now. And what's happening is instead of going, I'm going to fight you until you see it my way, you go, how can we try and approach this so that we can all get what we want? How can we come together? And then you're talking to the inner parts of yourself. How can we come together knowing, because you're a force of nature, inner part of me. You are something, you are an energy that most certainly wants to do what is best for me on the deepest level, even if we're going about it in interesting ways. So what are the ways we can align and ally together? Now, this is a concept I'm sharing with you. This is part of when I do certain inner work with people, when I am doing very deep work with people to help them shift and transform some of their inner resistances, some of the ones that are long standing, and we do deep alchemical work. Part of what we're doing is this level of parts work. So this is a concept I'll start sharing with you here so that you can maybe contemplate it a bit. If you're interested in exploring more parts work, I invite you to check out my description. Sometimes I have private sessions open, and if you find that there's not, then there's a good likelihood that I will have some kind of course or training material available as well. But if you have any questions about this kind of navigation, about parts work, because this is a big part of shifting from being in the mind and trying to solve things here to coming more in your body. It's about meeting things in your body that were subconscious. It's about connecting with parts of yourself, because when we keep things subconscious and we don't know why things are happening, it's because on some level we may not have felt equipped to face them or experience those parts of ourselves. But when we are able to meet those parts of ourselves with curiosity and inner strength and this resilience, we are also able to meet the external parts of our life with that. And this is part of the reason why doing this inner work can cause such profound shifts in the world around us, because everything is a fractal. So what we are doing within gets reflected without. And a lot of times when we do this inner work, when we are doing this really deliberate, precise willingness to work with ourselves, we find that the resistances we had externally start to shift, start to open up and clear. And and if they don't open up and clear precisely, then we find that they start to resolve themselves in very clear ways, or we know how to approach them. And so with that, what I will offer as the final perspective here for today's video, especially if you've watched it this far, is that wherever you are in life right now, I would love to reflect to you that you are right where you need to be. When we have inner pain and inner resistance, it's not a sign of failing on any single level. I have gone through a lot of my life with a lot of resistance and with a lot of challenge and struggle. And my ability to shift with it right now is a big part of what I'm excited to share with you on this channel, in the private sessions I do, in the workshops I do, in the trainings that I do, because I perceive it is natural for all of us to thrive. It is natural for you to thrive. It's not a failing for you to have any kind of struggle. And you absolutely can shift your inner experience, and you can experience more flow in your life. And if you are watching to this point, you are well on your journey with that, whether it's through these videos, whether you're also watching other videos, whether you're going to get more trainings, you will know the steps. And I invite you to check with your inner guidance on what steps are needed. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments you want to share, please go ahead and leave them in the comment field in this video, and we can always go deeper together. So with that, I appreciate you. I'm envisioning you in your deepest flow state. Please do like, subscribe, and share if this has been of use to you, and I look forward to our next conversation together. And I feel inspired to say, Danielle out.